I still remember the smell of the kerosene lamps flickering against the wood-paneled walls of our kitchen. It was a heavy, sweet scent that usually meant safety, but on that Tuesday night it felt like it was suffocating me. I was 17, sitting at the long oak table, watching my father's reflection in the darkened window. He was leaning over a basin of water, the blade of his straight razor catching the dim light. In the Amish world, everything has a sound, and the sound of that blade scraping against his skin, the rhythmic, harsh rasp of metal on stubble, is something I can still hear when the room gets too quiet. You see the buggies on the side of the road and you think of peace, you see the plain clothes and the quiet smiles and you think we've found a way to escape the chaos of the modern world. But what you don't see, and what I didn't understand until that night, is the weight of the silence. In the old order, your body isn't really yours. It's a map of the Ordnung, the unwritten set of rules that governs every breath we take, every stitch in our dresses, and even the hair on a man's face. I used to watch the boys during Rumspringa, the ones who were testing the fences of our world. They looked so young, their faces smooth and bare, laughing as they drove too fast down gravel roads. I didn't know then that their smooth skin was actually a ticking clock. I didn't know that every time a young man shaved, he was performing a ritual of waiting. To the outside world, a beard is just a style choice, a bit of vanity, or a way to keep warm. But in the community I grew up in, hair is a boundary. It is a marking of territory. That night, my brother Daniel was sitting across from me. He was 21, and for the first time in his life he looked terrified. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring at my father's razor. There was a tension in the house that felt like a storm about to break over the barn. My mother was scrubbing the floors with a ferocity that made her knuckles turn white, her eyes never leaving the wooden planks. We were taught never to ask questions, to let the bishop and the elders carry the secrets, but the air in that room was thick with something we weren't allowed to name. I remember thinking how strange it was that a man's entire identity could be tied to whether or not he let a razor touch his chin. We were told it was about tradition, about following the scriptures, but as I sat there in my scratchy apron, feeling the heat from the wood stove, I realized there was a much darker reason why the men in our community were forced to change their very appearance overnight. There's a reason we never spoke about the transition from the boy to the man, and why the first sight of a beard on a neighbor's face would send a chill down my spine. I'm Rebecca, and I spent 18 years living under the shadow of the Ordnung. I'm finally ready to tell you the truth about the tradition that changes an Amish man forever, and why the beard is the most public secret we ever kept. To the English, a beard is just a trend or a bit of scruff. But in my world, it was the ultimate dividing line. We lived by the Ordnung, a set of rules that weren't written in any book you could buy at a store, but were etched into our souls from the moment we could walk. The Ordnung dictated the width of a hat brim and the color of a woman's cape, but for the men, the law of the face was the most absolute. You see, an Amish man cannot grow a beard until the morning after his wedding night. It's the visual vow, a permanent wedding ring made of hair because we don't believe in wearing jewelry. But there was a fear beneath that rule that no one talked about. A single man, a boy really, no matter if he was 18 or 25, had to be clean-shaven. To have even a hint of stubble was a sign of rebellion, a mark of hochmut, or pride. If a boy showed up to Sunday singing with a shadow on his jaw, the whispers would start before the first hymn was finished. The bishop would look at him not with anger, but with a cold, crushing disappointment that felt heavier than any shout. I remember watching my cousin Isaac try to hide a patch of hair he'd let grow during a week he spent working away from the district. He looked over his shoulder constantly, flinching every time a buggy slowed down near his farm. He wasn't afraid of being caught by the police or the outside world, he was afraid of the meidung, the shunning. In our community, the fear of being found out wasn't just about getting in trouble. It was about becoming a ghost while you were still breathing. If you broke the Ordnung, if you refused the razor before you had the right to lay it down, you were essentially erasing yourself from the family table. We were taught that the beard was a symbol of biblical manhood, reaching back to the patriarchs, but as I grew older, I started to see it as a cage. It was a way for the elders to see exactly who belonged to a woman and who was still under the thumb of the church. There were no exceptions, no excuses. I once saw a man with a skin condition that made shaving agony, his face weeping and red, yet he still stood at the basin every morning with that blade. To stop would be to declare himself an outcast. There was a secret pressure in that house, a feeling that if we didn't follow these tiny physical laws, the whole world would come crashing down. And for one person I loved, that pressure was about to reach a breaking point. Gemini said, "It was late October, the kind of night where the wind howls through the gaps in the barn siding and makes the animals restless. My brother Daniel had been seeing a girl from the neighboring district, Mary Miller. In our world, a courtship is a slow, quiet dance of buggy rides and stolen glances during the Sunday singing. But Daniel was different. He had a fire in him that the Ordnung couldn't quite douse, a restlessness that showed in the way he handled the horses, just a little too fast, just a little too bold. One night, he came home long after the lanterns should have been blown out. I was waiting in the shadows of the hallway, my bare feet cold against the floorboards. When he stepped into the sliver of moonlight hitting the mudroom, I gasped. Daniel hadn't shaved in a week. On his chin was a thick, dark shadow, a defiance that screamed louder than any shout. He looked at me, his eyes wide and bloodshot, and pressed a finger to his lips. "Don't tell, ma'am," he whispered, his voice cracking. I just wanted to feel what it was like to be my own man, Rebecca, just for a few days. I felt a cold pit in my stomach. To an outsider, it was just stubble. To us, it was a declaration of war against the bishop. For 3 days, Daniel played a dangerous game. He wore his hat low, stayed in the fields until dusk, and avoided the communal meals. He was vibrating with a strange, frantic energy, like a bird hitting its wings against a cage. But you can't keep a secret in a community where every eye is trained to spot a loose thread or a stray hair. The breaking point came on Thursday. We were hosting a barn raising for the Stoltzfus family, and the entire district was there. The air was filled with the smell of sawdust and sweat. I watched Daniel from across the clearing. He was working high up on the rafters, his face hidden by the brim of his straw hat. But then, the bishop called out to him. Bishop Yoder was a man who seemed to be carved out of old hickory, hard, unyielding, and seeing everything. He asked Daniel to come down and help with the heavy lifting near the center post. As Daniel climbed down, his hat caught on a wooden peg and tumbled to the grass. The sun hit his face, illuminating the coarse, dark growth on his jawline. The entire clearing went silent. The hammers stopped. The women stopped stirring the iron pots of stew. It was as if the very wind had died down. My father stepped forward, his face turning a ghostly shade of gray. The bishop didn't scream. He didn't move. He just stared at Daniel's face, at that forbidden growth, with a look of such profound betrayal that I felt my own breath catch. In that moment, the piece of our life was exposed for what it really was, a fragile glass ornament held together by fear. Daniel stood there, exposed and trembling, as the weight of centuries of tradition crashed down on his shoulders. I didn't know then that this was the day everything changed for our family, that the beard Daniel had grown in secret was about to tear us apart in ways I couldn't yet imagine. The silence at that barn raising wasn't just quiet, it was a vacuum, sucking the air right out of my lungs. The bishop walked over to Daniel, his heavy boots crunching on the wood shavings, and he didn't offer a hand or a prayer. He simply reached out and ran a calloused thumb over the stubble on Daniel's jaw. "A man who cannot wait for his wedding day," the bishop whispered, his voice carrying like a death knell, "is a man who cannot wait for God." That was the moment I realized the secret we never spoke about. The beard isn't just a sign of marriage, it's a brand of ownership. Once that hair grows, you are bound. You are anchored to the soil, to the community, and to the authority of the men who decide if you're worthy of a life. By growing that shadow before his time, Daniel wasn't just breaking a rule, he was rejecting the cage before they could lock the door. He saw what I was starting to see, that the peace everyone admires from the road is bought with the total surrender of who you are. The fallout was swifter than I imagined. My father had to shave Daniel himself that night in the barn, a ritual of shame that felt more like an assault than a grooming. The weeping I heard through the slats of the hayloft wasn't just from my brother, it was the sound of a family breaking. Within a year, Daniel was gone. He slipped out into the night with nothing but the clothes on his back and a smooth face that felt like a lie. And 2 years later, I followed him. I walked away from the lanterns and the scratchy wool because I realized I didn't want a life where my worth was measured by how well I hid my true self. Today, I live in a world of electricity and zippers and choices, but I still carry the weight of that silence. When I see a man with a beard now, I don't see a trend. I see the choice he was allowed to make for himself, a choice my brother had to bleed for. There's a reason we never spoke about why the transition was so strict, and I am finally telling you because the truth is more important than the tradition. The beard is a beautiful tradition for many, but for those of us who left, it's a reminder of the day we decided our lives belonged to us, and not the bishop. If you want to hear more about the secrets we carried behind those white fences, please subscribe and join me. There's so much more I haven't told you yet.